as many of you know from the Africa team, on a number of important projects, watching how our media was having impact and what the environment was during the critical Kenya election. His firm, to my way of thinking, is breaking new ground in this whole arena of false news, how to find it, how to track it, how to counter it, along with being extraordinarily innovative as far as digital media and how that works. During the Kenya election, I saw our work product, saw his work product, and was exceptionally impressed with it. During the last trip to Kenya, Lori and I spent 2.5 hours listening, which I think is the longest time that either of us have kept silent in a meeting.
It won't have to happen again.
Okay, that's fair, because you've heard some of this act. But David told us he was coming to the United States.
Mark.
I'm sorry. I've had a board meeting. I am blithering right now. And if you hear a gentle snore, just hit me in the ribs, please, okay? But I'm sorry, Mark. He was coming to the United States. I asked him to come down to Washington. He's filled his dance card with a whole variety of sessions in New York and Boston, Washington, and then taking some time off in Los Angeles before he goes home. He'll be back in September. I think this is a firm that is showing great leadership and innovation in a space that we all need to understand, because it is becoming a permanent part of the media environment that we work in. And if anything, because it is so cheap compared to other broadcast media, and because it is so used by, I'm going to say, the majority of this table as opposed to old people like me, and it is simply going to expand in impact, particularly in countries where our average population age is going down, and as we get closer and closer to 16-year-old vote, which I think we'll see in some countries within the next 3 to 5 years, starting with Great Britain. This is part of the permanent media environment going forward. And rather than repeat myself and call you David again, I'm going to sit down and shut up. Mark, take it away.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, I'll take that again. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Good job.
Those of you who have been to the African continent would know that call and response is big in a number of countries. Kenya, certainly one of them. And so we actually have a way and a phrase of finishing one another's sentences that's very sing-song like, so I'd kind of say that, we finish one another's sentences. That good afternoon means a lot to me. And thank you, Bill. I appreciate the opportunity to come here at your invitation and to meet with all of you, to give a bit of context before we get into the presentation. As he said, we are working with IFEST and specifically Kenya, and we're performing a project that has been titled Social Listening. And within that, we've been looking back at 2017 as a pivotal year in Kenya's democracy. And specifically, we're looking at the role that digital channels, digital media has played in, whether it's attacks on the electoral management body, the IEBC, to misinformation and the fake news landscape, to really the future of young people, first-time voters, and where things stand today, from party politics to just publics at large. And so it's been an exciting project. We've had a lot of firsts, and we have a great collaborator in Carla Kianisi, who we work quite closely with in the Nairobi office, and a number of you really who I've never had the chance to lay eyes on or to meet, but I might see you TC'd or signing a document or somewhere on VeriSign. So it's a pleasure to be here, not just as Mark from Lendo, but certainly as a collaborator and somebody working on the ground to shape what we believe will be a point of view that helps not just Kenya, but certainly other Kenyan and African and global South, or as I heard it put yesterday, global majority, which I kind of liked as an interesting point of view. So last of the introductions is a little bit about myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of Nendo, and Nendo has two meanings, one in Swahili, one in Japanese. In Swahili, it comes from the word mwenendo, which means a trend or a habit. In Japanese, it comes and takes after the word for wet clay. And so for us, we like both examples. One, studying connected Africans, some 450 billion of them on the internet. And as you'll see, others with mobile phones. And wet clay, just saying that we have this chance to actually get into the room, have a seat at the table to mold strategies and plans and rapid response and tactics for organizations. So with that said, I'd love to get into the presentation, which, while it says Kenya here, I will try to bring some points and land them and apply to you some of the program work, and hopefully we can have a robust question and answer session. So one of my favorite quotes, I've been quoting it for a number of years now, is by Mo Ibrahim. He is the Sudanese-born, London-based billionaire and philanthropist, notably who now gives presidents an award if they step down early in Africa, or step down in a very progressive way to cede power. He hasn't given the award away in the last few years, and that says something about the state of democracy. But there's something that he said that caught my attention years ago. He said that it's impossible to keep a dictatorship in a country where mobile penetration has passed a certain threshold. The ability of people to exchange information freely would itself be a democratizing factor. I've quoted this. I may as well have a plaque in our office for it. And I held on to the ideals of this for quite a long time, until about 2015. And I've been quoting it since 2010, thereabouts, when I first came across the quote. And that's because something changed. We would assume here that it's in the interest of everybody in the village not to poison the well. And yet, as it would later be discovered, and as we figured out now, that some people have no interest but to generally sow discord or misinformation, disinformation, and otherwise. So the devices themselves and the technology itself is not purely a democratizing factor. It needs other sets of factors in place to uphold that. And so if we look at that as our lens, to go into what I prepared today, there's been an evolution across the world in terms of mobile phone devices. Some of you can picture yourself along this continuum, a dated time, a couple $1,000s, maybe a couple contracts that are memorable, times in a country where you may have been the only one in your family or company with access to a phone. But for many people across the continent, we're way past this level here. And if there's anything that's a signature for what's happening on the continent, it's that devices are defining spaces. And so Mo Ibrahim became a billionaire by selling a telco. And so telecoms are a key battleground in not just the information landscape, but certainly just access to these devices. And it speaks to, I believe, a point that cuts across different markets. For Africa today, the GSMA, the Global GSM Association, says that there's 731 million SIM cards on the continent. And specifically, thanks to low-cost smartphones and legacy or feature phones, you actually now have close to 500 million mobile subscribers in terms of unique people with access to a phone. And yes, there's fewer people with smartphones, but this number here is pivotal because at the last count, smartphones have been outselling laptops or computers at least 5 to 1. So this is the device, and from what I've heard from a gentleman called Toby Shapshak, the killer app in Africa is actually radio, because these phones are a proxy now for the physical radio that people will carry around. And so just the antenna is literally the earbuds, if you like, and we tend to look back on this device, its screen size, how much information one can take here, our attention spans, because while we develop full and rich interactive experiences, sometimes we need to strip them down for feature phones or phones like this. Certainly those with Opera Mini, which if some of you have heard, is the most popular device, browser or web browser in this part of the world, but it also sacrifices and is an enemy to Facebook and many others because it denies everybody else a lot of data. So to get into it, where's the continent going now? This here is a call box graveyard, and it's a great symbol for how fast change has happened thanks to these phones. Over the last decade, mobile devices have defined Africa and led to it being called, amongst other things, Silicon Savannah. And so this term here is a term of endearment. As I said, it speaks to the potential. Mobile money sending well over a quarter of Kenya's GDP, and if you look to different countries, mobile money is transforming societies. It's not as simple anymore in that banks caught on to this and started to put in place the measures that wouldn't allow them to be disrupted in the way they've been in Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, and a handful of other countries. But it speaks broadly to the concept of what's happening in Africa today. Now, the youth population, the first-time voters of the next 2 decades, will grow up in this world with these devices. And it's them and the ways that we ensure that they get access to information, the ability to express themselves, and upholding electoral management bodies. That's part of the context of why we're proud to support and work with IFES, and certainly why I believe that you're supporting in the ways that you are too. Quick transition now. False news isn't exactly new, but it certainly has taken on a new flavor, say over the last 2 years or so, 2 to 3 years. And Kenya is no exception. And so when we look to Africa and the rest of the continent, we see reason for concern, some reason for celebration and for a positive outlook. But what we know globally is this is something that no one has truly, quote-unquote, figured out. If you look at definitions of false news, what a lot of people agree on, certainly scholars, is that this is a problematic term. It's a loaded term, which means a different thing here in the US, depending on what side of the country I fly to or travel to. And same thing with Kenya as well, but this one here does stick and catch my attention that it's formerly a full term for defining websites consisting of intentionally fabricated news stories, but now has been used to describe virtually anything that doesn't agree with your worldview. And so in a landscape where official pronouncements trust has to be centered around electoral management bodies, and you have to help them uphold that and maintain the flow of information, this word and it being loosely tossed around, especially to some of the partners you support, is the place we're in and the place we're certainly getting into as things get more sophisticated. It isn't new in the sense that yellow journalism has been around for some time. Exaggerated claims, slightly misleading approaches to the news, or presenting the news in a particular slant to sell or to aggravate or raise emotions. This has been happening and has translated to the internet, and it's been around, I think longer than 40, 50 plus years. This example from Nigeria caught my eye because it's a phenomenon that's not unique to Kenya. Certainly a lot of global majority countries don't look at the media the way that the US might. So the US has had the media and the fourth estate as this, bastion of upholding checks and balances on government and so on. But when you get to Kenya, when you get to Guatemala, Brazil, India, the rest of the world, there's challenges around even the ownership of media houses. Political figures are working very hard to establish themselves there, and if not directly with a material stake, certainly with allegiances and alliances. One of the ways that manifests is through brown envelope journalism, is your ability to influence or take away from certain stories. And this here is an example from Nigeria where a televangelist, as it would happen, TB Joshua, very, very, very popular figure, is being described here by Nicholas as Nicholas being the only person at that visit who did not take 50,000 naira from this instance. And so it's whether it's coverage of the church or religion or some of them or sport, some of you may have seen. It's not something to be proud about, but a Kenyan referee said to take part in the World Cup actually was caught on camera taking a $600 bribe. Mm. And Kenyans online have been saying, well, you know what, corruption spans everyone. I mean, it's a shame, but this here is one of the challenges, I guess, of this time. It's very common to find this from the driver who drove you there to the editor of the day and so on. Now, we can't talk much about false news, I think, without a pit stop here to talk about Cambridge Analytica and specifically what they deployed it's been contested the extent of their work. But I'll reflect on what's actually been seen in Kenya and Nigeria, which are two countries that actually emerged out of the investigative story by Channel 4 as them having had a hand. And I'll share just our reflections as NEMDO on what they did and where I believe they kind of oversold themselves. And so if we take Cambridge, this will not be news to you really. Some of the key campaigns, Brexit, the US election, Ted Cruz's campaign. We won't spend too long here really. You have their funding from Mr. Mercer, participation from Mr. Bang on the alliance there, and the fact that they've used Facebook, hence getting banned, and starting much of a conversation that started in February of this year around what was their actual role. I do have something here. I might not spend too long on it, but this is how they actually went about the work that they allegedly did here. So a gentleman called Alexander Coben ran a paid survey where he paid people to provide their Facebook details and in return take a survey that allowed him a large enough audience to test and come up with what they describe as their key point of differentiation, psychographics. And so here, not only do they take your data, but that of your friends, hence the multi-millions of people whose data claims to have been compromised. And so these psychological patterns paired with targeted personalized advertising are the secret formula that Cambridge Analytica, to sum it up in one slide in 2 minutes, purported to do. Now, with all that said, this here is a sense of what that would look like. They're trying to mine as much data as they can find on a given populace. And with that, come up with, they're saying, personality, intelligence, your satisfaction, political views, sexuality, profession, in addition to the standard demographics. This is what they said that they did. This is what they sold to governments. And certainly they got more business after the US election was done. And Kenya was one of their actual clients. Nigeria, though, and specifically the last election, Goodluck Jonathan versus current President Muhammadu Buhari, were the target of Cambridge Analytica's work. And in the Guardian's investigative piece, it was specific videos targeted at inflaming Islamist rhetoric about the potential of a Goodluck Jonathan presidency. So we're talking some very, very, very graphic videos. I don't have them here, but beheadings and all sorts of fear mongering around what Islam would look like and how it would manifest in Nigerian society as a result of his presidency. That's Goodluck Jonathan, who was not successful in the last election. So this was tied back to Cambridge Analytica's work, and it was the whistleblower who actually was able to out them on this particular instance. So this is Cambridge Analytica in Nigeria as witnessed and shared in that case by the whistleblower. In Kenya, however, it's been clear that they've been working in Kenya and they've made no secret about it. So there's a case study that's been available for at least 4 years on their website, of a group known as Strategic Communications Limited. There, what they said is that they helped the National Alliance, the current president's party, before they amalgamated to the Jubilee Party, beat the opposition candidate, the Orange Democratic Movement, in the last election. They said they did this with research. So nothing online, nothing of what we've seen, and that's been touted in the US, but just purely with research across the 47 counties in Kenya. When asked, the spokesperson and director for diaspora and digital at the presidency saying they've never worked here. He was right and he was wrong. It's Strategic Communications Limited, but as you can see, that's the Cambridge Analytica logo there. So they have worked there, and they did embed themselves again this last election. And it got way more heated, and certainly we saw a new tenor or style of ads that we've never seen in Kenya's history that really caused an uproar. This is what Cambridge Analytica said, and this is, I guess, an important part. They said that we would stage the whole thing. They made no apologies or made it absolutely clear what they claimed to do to lead to the first victory of President Kenyatta under the Jubilee Party. So this here, just to quote Mark Turnbull, who worked at they actually filed for bankruptcy. He said they rebranded the party wrote the manifesto, ran over 50,000 surveys, wrote all the speeches, and staged the whole thing. Now, that's a loaded term. I mean, this is caught on camera with him saying this. The Kenyan election, the August one, the general election, had the presidential election annulled. And so when you say phrases like stage the whole thing, it's a pretty loaded statement to say. And so I think the way he concluded it was, he said just about every element of President Kenyatta's campaign. This is Cambridge Analytica making no apologies, being very clear they were present, embedded, and working. I think they oversold themselves a little bit. I think there's a lot of Kenyans who worked probably just as hard as them or under them to make this possible, to make it happen. And because they weren't doing the psychographic work, I think it was just more of they were in front of a potential client trying to sell themselves and puff themselves up. But there's no mistaking that their work left an impact, I believe a negative one, and they weren't alone when they worked in Kenya either. As irony would have it, when people suspected, this is in July of last year, that Cambridge was working there was actually fake news about Cambridge Analytica and them working in Kenya. So somebody actually made a false document, purportedly from Cambridge Analytica, leaked it to the press and to everyone, and Cambridge Analytica had to come and say, that's not from us. It's really not from us. It's from someone else claiming that we're the ones. So they had to call fake news, if you like. It was pretty accurate. It was supposedly written between Cambridge Analytica and the presidency or the office of the president in his campaign, but it wasn't from them, as far as we can tell even now. What we could say is the most damaging and polarizing work of the last campaign was the first time Kenyans see attack ads. And not just attack ads, but no holds barred, a brand of political advertising that is we've seen and heard from in the US before, but never seen it this close, this gripping, and this direct in Kenya. And so what you have here is a campaign called The Real Raila, which many people, we're talking even the press, very respected people in society, still believe is Cambridge Analytica's work. Cambridge Analytica denied it, so they had nothing to do with the campaign. Google, Facebook were all being, angrily reached out to say, how can you allow these types of ads with this type of rhetoric to come and actually, penetrate cyberspace? How aggressive the ads were was painting pictures of violence, poverty, taking actual ticks in the opposition candidate's demeanor and using those to, as a slight against him, reshaping the letters of his name, Raila, right, to spell the words a liar, and then going down a whole rabbit hole of conspiracy theories about lies he's told. So it's very sophisticated, very targeted, and they spent quite a big media budget digitally to penetrate and actually push this message. And it turns out it was actually Harris Media, not Cambridge Analytica, who worked on this. They worked directly for, if you take a expose by Privacy International for the national, the Jubilee Party, but specifically the family of the current president. And they worked specifically to polarize and to spread as much of these more hateful messages about the opposition candidate. And it included actually taking legitimate media houses, infiltrating their citizen journalism websites. So the equivalent of iReport on CNN. And so you file a story, make sure it just gets through the editor, and then basically pumping money to that specific story because it's leading to a legitimate news site. But what many people wouldn't know is that it's the citizen journalism side of that. But to be fair, they weren't alone. And what that means is that the opposition also contracted Aristotle, who, if you may have heard, were actually kicked out of the country and deported unceremoniously. And they were there too to provide their own research for the opposition around the election. And probably the most notable case of an outside firm is Bell Pottinger, the UK public relations firm, and how they sowed racial discord in South Africa. And that story is probably the best documented of all three. But sometimes it's made to look as though it's the ruling party that was the one to contract such services was certainly. If you look to the digital diet of last year to figure out what fake news purveyors would have focused on, you need to look no further than the top 10 search results. The number one was the results of the election. As has now emerged, both from research on the ground, people were struggling not with the entire process up front, but what is the tallying, transmission, and sharing of information that follows. And so I believe right now the IFS team on the ground is making some clear statements and recommendations on investing in explaining the entire process to the public, because you can front load it to build up the trust, even though there's certainly attacks and challenges to this in the actual voting day, but the transmission tallying, it's equally important, and certainly the list here tells of that. So IBC results, I'm actually not sure why the Gambia, we've asked it a few times, the Gambia was second. Could be their election, but we're not entirely sure. Despacito, as you can see, is there too. And then political, largely with presidential results at the bottom, because we had a second presidential election. So people were curious of the result, despite the opposition candidate staying or abstaining, and asking his supporters to abstain from the vote. So this brings us to where we come in terms of a solution and just a way to change the conversation. We had collected hundreds and hundreds of examples of fake news from all over the continent, but mostly from Kenya. And so we built a fake news quiz, which I'll encourage you to take in your own time. This is Africa's first fake news quiz. The idea is that of all the ways to transmit media literacy learning and how to unlearn certain bad patterns that bad actors take advantage of on places like WhatsApp, on places like Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere, one needs to essentially go through the quiz to figure this out for themselves. The idea is that at the end of it, as has been happening now, people would share it. So with this, we've had some learnings. The first is that Nigeria, even though there's only one Nigerian question, is the clear market that has responded the most to the quiz. And so we have our sights set on them with the 2019 February election and supporting the electoral management body there. I'll be happy to have that conversation. But to just quickly do some definitions before taking you into how fake news is not just online, it's impacting people offline, even in rural and peri-urban areas. I'll give you some quick definitions as we move on. False news is articles that purport to be factual. I don't believe I have to define it, but I will anyway, but contain intentional misstatements with interest to arouse passions, viewership, or deceive. False amplifiers, activity of inauthentic accounts. We've heard a lot about bots and the Internet Research Agency in Moscow as examples of that. It's happening in Kenya, has happened, and has happened as early as 2011. So there was people that I know personally who were paid for 8 hours a day to sit in front of a computer and open up a Google email address, a Facebook account, a Twitter account, and put everything into a spreadsheet. And just creating an arsenal of bots that would later be weaponized and used, and we've seen them being used, especially last year, but as far back as 2012 and the 2013 election as well. And lastly, disinformation, so actively amplifying biased or misleading information with malicious intent. So the key thing that fake news purveyors, we believe, in the global majority, and certainly from Kenya and other African countries, will go for is existing centers of trust. So the dailies and the most distributed daily in Kenya was attacked repeatedly. And this was raised in its sophistication. So this is the physical paper of the actual daily. This is people who photo manipulated that cover and began to spread this out on WhatsApp. Wanjigi is a financier of the opposition alliance. And so the Daily Nation actually had work actually just telling people, pick up the actual paper. Don't just look at the one you've been seeing online. And the skepticism came from the fact that they send up to 4 different versions of the same newspaper to different parts of the country. So if you're on the coast, you get sometimes a more coast-friendly or opposition-friendly front page. If you're in the western part of the country, the same. If you're in the capital, you get a more balanced view. So people would take this and understand, oh, that could be the one from another part of the country that I'm not in. Really just trying to sap into the trust people have in the Daily Nation. This is a quick video to just to show a little bit about Kenyans on Twitter. I wouldn't have all the time, I think, to walk through it. So I think it'll help characterize the visit. I think in the interest of time, I may pause it there. I think the main thing to pick out of just that last one is activism, fact checking. There's members of the military, of the police, of the presidency, all of whom say, despite Twitter having a ratio of I think it's an eighth of the audience that Facebook has in Kenya, it's a place that they're all paying very, very close attention because this is the place which has led to not just, I'd say, campaigns like the ones you saw, but it has, issues of national security, and it's not uncommon to see Twitter referenced by the presidency or certain phrases that Kenyans have been talking about there. And so Kenya has this unique, I guess, media landscape, maybe not so unique when you look elsewhere, that has legitimized this audience. The challenge of that is that misinformation takes great advantage of this. And so last year was the best example of where, just to, I guess, to give an actual example, the opposition is seeking to maintain some kind of privacy and secrecy on who will be the flag bearer for the opposition. And those armies of bots that I mentioned earlier are there continually leaking false documents. And if there's anything that made the media landscape last year in Kenya tiring, it was the number of very, very well worded, phrased, designed fake news memos that were released. The electoral management body, part of the recommendations we did when we did a digital forensic study a number of weeks ago, when a story had emerged not just as a hashtag, but somebody was infiltrated at a popular media house, and the story was ran just so a screenshot could be taken of the story. If you look for it now, everybody knows that story about the IBC chairman resigning is false. But if you look, the legitimacy comes from a screenshot saying Capital FM, one of the leading digital houses, published it. And this is a screenshot from Twitter, so it must be true. And so that's all that they're going for, really, in this age of screenshots and falsified memos. So our recommendation to them, just to give an example, was, as the IBC, we recommend a standard way of taking photographs of documents, either scan it in the same scanner, which might be a bit tiresome, but will just create a sense of consistency. The second thing was we asked them to change the typeface, partly because what makes it so easy to make so many replicas of this is it's the same standard Microsoft Word set of fonts. So it makes it very easy for fake news purveyors to actually shift the burden of proof to you, and you're there calling a press conference at 8 a.m. the next morning because at 6 p.m. somebody's actually made a false document, knowing they have a 12-hour cycle to wait and to sow the misinformation and let it travel on places like WhatsApp. So this was one example, and there's several others we could look at that just give us a sense of where this is going. Zimbabwe. We have, of course, that being a key focus area. What we found about when we went deep into how the motivations and the MO of fake news purveyors is that it's hard to figure out exactly what they want, but um, they aren't experts per se. This here is a series of fake websites that are built purely for sharing on social for people who they don't expect to click on the links. The URL, if you look at the top, is foxnews24.com. A blend on Fox News, the US media house, and News 24, South Africa, and for the Zimbabwean diaspora and Zimbabweans in South Africa, one of the most popular online websites. They're not counting on you visiting this site because if you visit it, you'll realize those aren't the colors. But what they're counting on is you sharing the story. And just the weight of expectation the diaspora had, Robert Mugabe's movements are fewer, he's less in the public eye, so people are essentially waiting for him to be pronounced dead, if you may. And so this here and other examples like it, this is texasexpress.com, and you can see it's the exact same template. And so what we found is networks of the same, in principle, system administrator, website administrator, mirroring these sites and just looking to get as many retweets, clicks, and views, and particularly from the diaspora. The diaspora have the connectivity, and they tend to have a keen interest on matters and are only served by digital. But to come to Kenya, what we also found is people have been taking existing media houses and registering other URLs. Standard Media that's probably the second largest print publication and media house in the country. Somebody has mirrored their entire site and done a decent job at it. They've actually tried to do this. The most challenging part about this is they publish real news, and then every so often will leave a fake news story. So it's part of creating that legitimacy and trust, and then planting a story to get cyberspace lit. There are a set of things, if you take the quiz, that you'll figure out that they're missing here, which are part of what we were trying to show. These are actual examples from the quiz. This is the actual Standard Media website. And so they tried with the colors, a little bit with the fonts, to come as close to it as possible. And even Standard Media itself fell for fake news. This is, I guess, meta in that it's a fake news story in a real site saying that they fell for fake news during the time of the election because they saw an image and they had a preconceived notion and ran it anyway against their better judgment. People have been taking research firms that do the largest mainstream polling, right, sometimes commissioned by the Electoral Management Body, and replicating their entire websites. This is Ipsos, right? So people are counting on you not knowing which URL belongs to the real Ipsos, and hoping that you would then share the research from this firm, knowing that you've seen it in the papers, and it's the evening, it may be coming out in tomorrow's papers as well. The last example of fake news offline comes from a gentleman called Mr. Paul Otuoma. He was contesting the governorship in a particular county, the county of Busia in Western Kenya, and he woke up on the day of the primaries to find thousands of posters that he had defected to the opposition, to the main ruling party. He's an opposition candidate and a strong one. And then people had replaced all the front covers of the day's newspaper in that specific county to say that he had truly defected. And by the time he called the press conference, people were lining up at the polls. By the time he got on radio, vernacular radio, to announce that this is fake news, those posters are not me, or I did not defect, he was actually beaten by the people who'd gone on the ground, infiltrated likely a truck that brings in the day's papers, replaced all the front covers, printed all the flyers, put them up, and let the voters decide. So the actual incumbent governor, who, I'm not saying he did this, but it was to his benefit that this would happen, because he was not as strong of a candidate, he's still in power even today. And so that just partly shows the offline impact of this. We have a couple other examples, not in the presentation, on how the rural areas get news through WhatsApp and sometimes are prepared to make decisions from this. We supported a fake news fact checker who spent time in Kisumu, an opposition stronghold, and he was actually trying his best to engage people on the ground in the August election. WhatsApp, as I said, is the key battleground. Most people do not want you to click on the link at all. They're counting on this image and the text herein. And so here's a proclamation that people expected. Donald Trump had campaigned on immigration reform, and so people expect, even though it's fake, you can see somebody here saying that, oh, I heard that a delegation of 50 Kenyans has been denied visas, when truly he signed no executive order of this kind, saying that there wouldn't be 100 visas a year for Kenyans. This is the same in Venezuela, in Colombia specifically, I think India. WhatsApp is actually under a lot of public pressure right now, with India in mind, to fix how hoaxes actually travel there. There's been 2 people killed, I believe, in the last 7 days off of a WhatsApp hoax alone in India. And so they are feeling more of the pressure. They have some interventions they've spoken of trying, but there's no telling whether they'll be passed across to other markets and more. The quiz also looks at recruitment scams. It's hard to show everyday voters the impact and the consequences of sharing a fake news story. Oh, it was fake. Well, my bad, right? Nobody got harmed. So the way that we found the best example for this is actual job recruitment scams done primarily on WhatsApp. These actually lead to human trafficking, sometimes abductions, certainly extortion from job seekers who are purely just trying to find an opportunity. So for us, that's been the part of the process, is how to actually show people or warn them that forward on WhatsApp or that share actually comes with consequences, not just for them, but certainly for people they may love and have close to them. This was us monitoring the election primaries, showing that fake news actually took a dip in shares when mainstream media goes out into the countryside to share content. And so our hope is that this enables electoral management bodies to either engage media houses in distributed reporting from different parts of the country, because that just delegitimizes or lessens the number of shares of fake news publishers who tend to be concentrated in urban areas, if not capital cities, as far as we can tell. I'll skip this. These are some of the trending stories that happened at the time. They are very outlandish, but they play into ethnic stereotypes. So maybe I'll take the first one. The most shared one during the election primaries was that a sacred mugumo tree or fig tree had fallen. Immediately the opposition candidate's plane landed, sending panic waves with the elders of the ethnic group of the ruling party leader. So again, sounds crazy, lightning striking, a plane landing. But people were genuinely there saying, this tree means a lot to us. And here's a media house that's actually prepared to serve us by talking about our tree, our elders, our customs. And they did reporting. It was all false, but it played in to this idea that they were under attack, that they needed to mobilize and organize as the ruling party, that their victory was not certain. And then there's others as well, including how technology was supposed to be a dress rehearsal, a technology outage, for rigging or stealing the election. So the fake news battleground, as I've said now, is not purely on social networks. It actually spans longer and further than that. And so this has led to us trying to evolve our thinking and the approach. So as I said, with the electoral management body, we even recommended that they get a specific type of ink and sign a specific type of way, just purely because I can lift a signature off of a virtual document, and we've seen that. So we're just trying to encourage them to make it a bit harder, because the news will travel, and these pictures or scans of memos and articles are key. But just to make it a little harder, as we even encourage them to either buy a paid font or ask a type foundry to make a specific typeface for them, with a view to just making themselves a bit more distinguishable and making it harder for people to copy or delegitimize or attack them. So that's us seeking to evolve lenses. And if I could just share a couple of thoughts before we transition to questions. I think the main thing is, if you're in an election today, WhatsApp is the key battleground. It is dark in the sense that you'll never really get a sense of what's being shared there, the extent of it, but it should be part of the media mix, or the one of the channels that you use to disseminate factual and accurate information. What we have in our recommendations for the IFS project, we'll be wrapping up at the end of this month, is that there's an actual appointed WhatsApp number. Now, you must make no expectations of any kind of reply, but WhatsApp has a feature known as status, which we feel is a very, very underutilized tool. What status is the equivalent of Snapchat or stories. It is images or videos that disappear within 24 hours. Now, if people save this phone number, and we publish our official point of view on the record for WhatsApp, but not through just a WhatsApp forward or an image, but on an actual line people have saved, we believe that that's actually going to distinguish the electoral management body and allow them the chance to share 24-hour-long updates, especially in critical times. And if it's the official number, then that at least has some kind of grounding, because WhatsApp is verifying business numbers. And so while it might not do everything we may want to do, that to us has been the closest solution we've come to. And that means a change. You're now talking about 16:9 video and so on, but our hope is that this creates some kind of solution in a world that's moving very fast, and certain behaviors have been changed before our very eyes. Last one is a quote from Alvin Toffler: "The illiterates of the 21st century won't be those who cannot read or write. It'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." So that's my presentation. Thank you. I know I went a bit over time, and I hope it was valuable. Yes, please.
Just going on your last point, this WhatsApp, Snapchat type feature, this Dallas feature, it's fairly new, right?
That's right.
Do you know, are people really utilizing this yet?
So as far as we can tell, it has, I think, just about 450 million users across the world. It's actually, I believe, 2.5 times the size of Snapchat in, I want to say, a fifth of the time that Snapchat has been around, even though Snapchat's a publicly traded company. So for us, the growth there is something that seems to have even, not surprised WhatsApp, but certainly as they report these statistics, or Facebook, the parent company, does, it's one where they're pleased with the results. I think Facebook or Messenger Stories, another copycat, didn't do as well, whereas WhatsApp status has clearly been the front runner. I believe even equivalent, or if not more than Facebook Messenger, their actual staple, or Facebook Stories, which is one that hasn't been used as much. So I'd actually believe that it's a kind of like almost like platform in waiting. And I feel that we've not seen any brands use it yet, but certainly in the work that we've been doing and the research, it's emerging more as a platform people would actually use if they don't already use it.
Where do you think this goes? I mean, the numbers you throw out are astounding. The fact that an application or a site can be suddenly around the world in seconds, and suddenly becomes a story that your language on the existing centers of trust being the focus to try and undermine. Where does this all go?
I think there's reason to believe that now, whether through actually owning the media houses, or certainly infiltrating and compromising certain journalists, or going the longer way of saying we'll play faster and leaner with the internet and just sow misinformation or confirmation bias to certain audiences in more polarized environments. I think the web, to end with the quote that I began with, is no longer, in my view, that democratizing factor. The more these devices get in the hands of people, the better it gets. I think the more challenging it gets, because of the reliance on these phones and devices and the trust that's there in them, more than other channels. I think we've just ran some focus groups in Nairobi with the range of voters, largely youth, meaning 18 to 35, and yeah, the amount of trust they have in digital devices to deliver the news to them. They're less reliant on radio, but it's still, of course, the quote-unquote killer app in that everybody listens to radio. But the reliance and their ability to pay attention to it, I think, is waning. And I guess my main concern is watching a new digital-first media house come up that has strong political leanings and ownership and is explicit about that. But that just shows and pulls in eyeballs and traffic. And so that to me still registers as the probably the most challenging battleground. It's not purely what happens in instant messaging networks or social networks, but certainly Google, if somebody says, I'm going to make digital my thing of the next 5 years in the election, and I'll take sites at anybody based off of whoever pays me to do that. So what we believe right now is that, not what we believe, we've seen it forensically, that the current ruling party, the Jubilee Coalition or the Jubilee Party, and the National Super Alliance, NASA, and its composite parties both maintain on retainer essentially WhatsApp groups full of misinformation actors, right? The handymen, right? The henchmen, and then there's a particular topic of the day. It's this corruption story. It's this slant on the first lady. It's this. This is the hashtag. This is the time. These are the images. Go. And so every day you'll just see back and forth a series of exchanges in the trending topics list that speak to where this funding is coming from. And our hope is that it's delegitimized over time, but it's definitely a challenge that we aren't fully confident we've solved yet.
Thank you. We have a question from online. Chris, you're on.
Thanks. Hi, Mark. Thanks for being here. My name is Chris. I work on the Kenya project here at HQ. And I wanted to take a moment first to acknowledge Carla, who's also on the line and has been working closely with you there in Nairobi as our resident expert on education and outreach and engagement. And I know that she's had a lot of great insights that we want to make sure get across to the other folks at HQ as well. So I won't take credit for this question, but she was, the last time we talked, pointing out a lot of things that she and you had started to learn about how the things that we typically think of as methods for countering fake news in terms of myth busting and fact checking and sort of conventional, anti-fake news interventions are not necessarily effective, and exploration into what is an effective means of countering fake news. And it's possible I've missed it. I've been a little distracted by my 5-year-old, but if you could speak to that at all, about why those methods may not be as effective as assumed and what might be a more effective alternative.
Sure, and thanks for the question. And I think, I had mentioned Carl at the beginning of the session and just some of the work that we've done. So I appreciate the question. I think when we look at misinformation, the way that it's categorized now, I think what I started at the top by saying is it assumes some good faith in media houses and in publishers that is still present, but can be compromised to a far greater extent than it might be here in the US, just as an example. So that tends to be the first area where even the media houses themselves, one of the examples I'd shown, there's a media house who were the first to say that they had fallen victim to fake news in the middle of the election by saying, when the opposition leader had said nobody should vote, that was his point of view, abstain from the second presidential vote entirely until reforms are done. When one of the MPs aligned with him, an old picture was used to say that he was voting. It caused quite a lot of tension, and they walked back. To their credit, came back and said the mistake they'd made. But as I'd also shared, the sophistication of people saying, we don't even need the media house to publish it for longer than 5 seconds. Publish it and tweet it, we just need the screenshots. Then make the story disappear, right? Before your editor, your sub-editor, whoever else has the publishing privileges, we just need that because that's what is the currency for us. It's the bounty to go back and collect and say that we've actually done our job. Even if the story is not found on the internet, we don't expect that many people to verify. We're going to send this on WhatsApp and other closed networks and allow it to travel to say that what we have actually purported as the fake memo is legitimized by this media house. And so those are some of the new areas we've seen. To Doc Solutions, as I said, the clearest one that we've seen affecting an electoral management body, as we said, was one, just a consistent way of scanning. It tends to be that it's somebody's camera phone in the room, some kind of angle, some kind of table, and that's typically in the interest of time. But what we recommend is just a more consistent way. So if it's a slight discoloration because of the scanner, that helps. That pigment helps. It's harder to copy. We tell people, I think in the quiz, to actually zoom into the corners at times, just to look for those tells. And the second one I said was, if you can use a font that's not as common, you make it just that little bit harder for the next person to copy content and memos and declarations to the press. And then last one was just a different form of signatures and signing on documents, because those tend to be the three things people run circles around the press room or communications room at an electoral management body because they know they're not necessarily as fast, or they know that you wait to call a press conference rather than responding to the statement with a statement. And so those are the areas of compromise we've seen that certainly for Kenya, for other markets, we're keeping close tabs on, and we look to generate more solutions later this month when we host a co-creation workshop with IFES and several stakeholders that we're mobilizing in Nairobi.
Thanks. We'll look forward to those insights.
Thank you.
I have a question about were there any investigations or any legislation that someone went to prison for something like this, how that is working?
Yes, so actually that's probably the most important thing I didn't mention. Over the last 5 years, Kenya has gone through devolution, which has seen advancements in taking centers of power, institutions, and sending them into new counties from 8 provinces to 47 counties, 47 governors, senators, and several members of what they call the county assemblies. The challenge of that is even journalism and investigative journalism and holding power to account has devolved too. And there are certain governors who have been far more aggressive about anything that appears to be a criticism of them, including several people who have been actually taken to the courts and found guilty of a Facebook post, so sometimes as simple as a screenshot. So unfortunately, there's been that concern in that people, even in more rural areas with less access, simply for expressing themselves, even in vernacular, have seen a courtroom, have seen prison cells, and have seen actual sentencing. The good news from that, before we get to more bad news, is that the actual clause that had been used, called the Kenya Information Communication Act, was ruled unconstitutional. And so that was a big victory that an actual judge evaluated this, the same thing that had been used to threaten bloggers, threaten activists like Wanjeri, who you saw in the video, threaten so many people, was actually rendered unconstitutional. The bad news is the president just signed less than 2 weeks ago a new law that while it has some benefits, right, it's specific on certain aspects of cybercrime, it is far too punitive in the actual fines and sentencing it has for what it calls fake news, and it's far too broad, leading to a system that takes us 10 steps back. And that if literally the previous clause was called misuse of a licensed telecommunication gadget, and that was used to imprison people for Facebook posts. Now it's specific enough to say if you have spread fake news, right, that's 5 million shillings or this kind of sentencing. And that, even though it's a judge has ruled, has put in place an injunction, it's a shame it got to the president's desk and he actually put his pen to sign it. I think it was, in my point of view, misinformed. But there are some beneficial things in the full law. But at least for now, it's been put on hold pending the legal system working it out. Yes, please.
I had a question. So my question is, have you thought of actually collaborating with social media sites in like the activities that you do with Nendo to help either promote or like more systemically disseminate your quizzes and like different like analytical tools that you're developing? I know Facebook specifically has come up with like more robust government policy about fake news and is trying to like start investigative journalism fellowships and things like that. And so I was wondering if there's like an opportunity for collaboration there. I know WhatsApp is the main battleground, so I don't know if they've come up with similar policies or like what your views might be on that.
Thanks for the question. So yes, when Facebook came into town and wanted to publicize that they were taking the Kenyan election seriously, they called on us, and my team and I actually went to a Nairobi hotel and met with them. There they told us of their plans, which included a PSA, so a full-page ad in several of the dailies to say that if you do spot false news, here are the things you can do. And they had a WhatsApp logo, even though it was branded Facebook, which is the parent company. They also asked us to help with publicizing that if you report a post, that's actually going to be taken seriously. And one of the partners in the room was asked to provide some kind of moderator or oversight to allow certain hot phrases or ethnically charged words to be flagged or raised a bit higher, even though a global moderator might not see it. I don't think that much came of that particular session, in the sense that it was very focused on a certain outcome that Facebook had prescribed before the meeting. But we are keen to collaborate with them. We've shifted Stop, Reflect, Verify really at the with the advice of Laurie and Bill from the Nairobi meeting, towards more of a platform that can support electoral management bodies and others. And this includes technical support, it includes research support, and a process which we believe can actually be transplanted to different elections and markets. And the view there is to have a very clear point of engagement with social networking sites. Twitter and Facebook, fortunately, we've been on a first name basis with them. Facebook was actually at our office today in Nairobi on a different assignment, but we're more than just somebody who runs ads, and thankfully that's meant that we have just the room to engage. And I believe that if we could do that at a higher and deeper level, it needs us to probably prove a few things with the quiz. So for now, we've built an experience that can happen purely on Facebook of the same quiz through Messenger. Facebook's changed a lot in the last 6 months. There's things we were able to do last year that we were excited to bring into this year, and because of the changes with Cambridge Analytica and the API, some of that isn't it's actually not possible. But we just meant we're more creative with what we have. And our hope is, again, to just prove with a prototype. The quiz has had over 5,000 people take it, and as we move to the next phase, we're actually set to run ads for the quiz to publicize it to key audiences. Now with the social listening project, we've identified needs to raise their media literacy in a sense. And so we're hoping that gives us the learnings to come back to the table with a clear set of asks, and having already used their platform and come showing what we've built, saying what else we would need. Facebook has appointed, I believe, a number of foundations, some of which are based here in DC and in the US, including the Media Foundation and a few others. So I believe what it calls its election commission. So there's access to grants and support, even of data, provided it's used for research purposes. And so they've appointed, I think it's 8 foundations. We have a connection, I think, to one of the 8. If there's any other that you would have a connection to, we've sent it to Carla and others before. Our hope is really just whatever avenue can be used to get this learning, and use that to again, create institutional capacity or knowledge in electoral management bodies, then we'd be happy to have any kind of role in that.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that you mentioned was the unprecedented nature with which negative campaigning took place in Kenya. And one of the things which stands out of that, from that, is the fact that many underestimated what the landscape was going to evolve into. Looking ahead to 2022, you've got an election which is going to be very complicated, not just with regards to it's unclear who's going to be running, but then also you see this decentralized county level contest across 47 spaces. To kind of look at, someone also was in this room a little while ago who spoke on the fact that often we in the room look at fixing the last election while politicians are looking at the next election. How can we look ahead even further to kind of be in a better position to deal with an election in Kenya 2022?
Sure, and thank you for the question. I think you're right when you say that I mean, so much has changed since the handshake, and the handshake is the unprecedented, unexpected meeting of the president, the former prime minister, leader of the opposition, saying everything's behind us. We're working together 100%. I mean, there's people who have had generations who have learned to despise or not be particularly inclined to one side. And so it's left the country in a very interesting place, but probably one where politically anything is possible. So 2022 has a lot of eyes on it now. It was assumed that it was the deputy president's race to lose, not as much anymore. So much is up in the air. Now, if you're asking us about 2022, I think what we've learned now, just supporting IFES to look back at 2017, is that social listening as a practice, as a discipline, as a way of working is very much part and parcel of what we hope is not just the election command center, but certainly a key part of an electoral management body going forward. So that as a discipline or area, and the ability of people to either, so just to give an example, say a crisis looks like it's potentially emerging. Before you call on the press and host a press conference or take a set of actions, we believe just because of misinformation and how false amplifiers work, you must hold back until a particular level of engagement is reached, because you can essentially be baited now into making certain statements or legitimizing fringe comments that had no place with you and actual people declaring something against it. So for now, we feel it's the challenge is institutionalizing that now, making sure that that's in place. People have some preparedness around it. We're doing a lot of historical analysis at the year 2017, but we believe that there's the chance to do this on an ongoing basis, even in other markets. I believe, just to give an example of Nigeria, it has as many people online as Kenya has people, if you take some of the more generous estimates of stats of internet users. And so that holds a set of questions to us. Now, they are concentrated in urban and peri-urban areas largely, and it has its own set of unique power challenges and others with electricity and connectivity. But it's intriguing to us that that's an audience where, if you were to ask me, social listening again could play some kind of role there too. So that would probably be the most consistent thing I'd say. There's a lot of unknowns, as you said, commissioners resigning, potential constitutional reforms on the horizon. So it's about essentially just helping build some resilience at the IEBC with a view to the larger big picture, but certainly every upcoming event that day by day raises in the likelihood of happening. Yes, please.
My question is similar to Tito's earlier about your connecting with Facebook and other organizations like that. What work or thinking has your company done around connecting with telecommunications companies to use either SMS or MMS to reach those people who still aren't online? Because there's still a lot of places where people are online very limitedly or not at all. So have you worked at all in that space?
So in full disclosure, Safaricom, the largest telco in Kenya, is a client of ours on the private sector side. That does mean that there's room to have that discussion with them. We haven't broached it yet. We wanted a certain amount of traction for something like the quiz before they take what would be a pretty large, if it's bulk SMS, in-kind way of them choosing to transmit it to certain audiences. But for us, I think there's a room to engage. There's a report which I'd be happy to share, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, alleged that because people suspected them of being culpable for the spread of hate messages in the 2007-2008 general election, that they, in the 2013 general election, that they actually may have filtered or tinkered with the ability of certain SMSs and keywords to go out, I think before and just after election day. It's something like a 20-something page paper or PDF. I can't recall all the details in my mind, but what I'm not sure then is whether they actually, of their own power, chose to step in that way so as to remove the likelihood of them being told that they aided and abetted the spread of hate speech, which is a very legitimate concern from 07-08. So for now, we have the channel we could use and the people quite high up we could engage. We just haven't, we haven't gotten to the kind of critical mass we may have wanted, or really the ask. I think because it's not a political time now, a year before I think the election, we would have enough of a relationship to sit with them and say, hey, these are the interventions we'd like you through your foundation or through that channel. Of course, sometimes you have to, at least we would know the language to use to make it make some kind of commercial sense for them, now that we know them intimately. But it's a great idea, and it would be something we'd be happy to explore, not just in Kenya, but in the Vodafone group, or MTN, or others, especially those who have a Pan-African reach, Airtel as well.
And most of them have like CSR type branches as well.
Correct. Sometimes I find that we did a project with a telco in Sierra Leone, and I'm sure there's great like CSR foundation people there, but I find even having one commercial leader who will listen, or you can think about what's in it for them, either bragging rights on something, or trying to work out something in their interest. I find that so far for us has made we've gotten far better outcomes on engaging with telcos. And we've done that in Malawi, Sierra Leone, and Kenya. As I said, we're working with them there. So we try to almost have the foundation be one of the people in the group, but if there's some sponsor, in a sense, from the commercial side of the business, we've just found it makes things happen much, much faster.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that through the social listening exercise that there were certain populations that you saw needed kind of more media literacy training. Do you find that there are certain populations that are more vulnerable to fake news that is spread?
It's hard to say, but I'll tell you some of our hypotheses. Excuse me. So maybe just to start with some context from what we've seen, there was an interesting study that's food for thought it's funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and it was actually administered by the Mozilla Foundation because of the Firefox web browser. And the assumption was that, look at Kenya, mobile money, look at the global majority. If we put smartphones in the hands of everyday people at the end of a year, in terms of being more included financially in their earning power, their access to information, positive outcomes will be seen. And that wasn't the case. In this specific instance for Kenya, even though they were rural and peri-urban users who were equipped with these phones, the first thing was that nobody defined what a megabyte was for them. And so that's a foregone conclusion, right? And so they have a limited pie of income that previously had airtime apportioned, and now there's this thing kind of eating into that called megabytes, which caused them some trouble. Certainly everyone in the study. The second part, more specific to Kenya, was that the number one most visited website was a sports betting website by the end of the year, regardless of gender, called SportPesa. And what that led to was, again, fixed pot of income and even less to show for it at the end of a year. Despite the feelings of wins, losses, and even though net it was negative, the perception was different. So there was this concern around how do you almost create a chaperone for that first internet experience, because with false news, with certain publications in Kenya, there's a Ukrainian-funded, very popular website called Tuko. We've found numerous examples of fake news there, but they have a purely commercial outlook. So their job is, we want to have more page views from Kenyans than anybody else. We will pay for them. We will write salacious stories. We'll do anything and everything in between. So the challenge there is that they've actually gone to the extent of being embedded onto people's phones now. So if you buy a phone, it's possible that app is there and the notifications are turned on. So you're turning less to Your Nation and Standard and some of those sites to this one. So again, nothing specific in terms of a specific audience. I think our early indications from the focus groups and research have I know there's a second revision going on now, but one of the hypotheses is that I think what's called, we're going to come up with a name for this band of people who fall into this bucket, people who've migrated into the cities or into more urban areas, and then get phones and begin to engage. That it's hard to figure out how we isolate them specifically because they cut across age and gender and so on. But we found some concerns with that specific group that I think would be worth just a conversation internally. It may not lead to what I am expecting. It's probably a hypothesis at this point, but we've been trying to think through what ways we can segment audiences based probably off of behavior and use that with a view to raising their media literacy over time. Yes, please.
Do you think with the rise of fake news and privacy concerns coming to light, do you think that people are going to start to disengage from getting their media through Facebook or through WhatsApp and, shift to maybe a more traditional sense of getting their news, such as even a developing way through podcasts or a daily email? Maybe something more legitimate. Do you see that happening, or do you think the cap is off and we're always going to get our news at the second it happens?
I think it's a great idea, and I personally would wish for that. I think Facebook, Twitter, Google have entrenched themselves so aggressively for the rest of the world that they are building in, what, if you wanted to be critical, you could call addiction, what others might, more safely call the habit-forming senses of their products and they're baking that in so densely as a part of everyday life that it doesn't serve their commercial interest to hold back. And so for now, yes, the first thing that people look at, save for the alarm clock, is WhatsApp to set the agenda. Google is the default device in terms of like smartphones, and so that comes with search from there and certain data voids. When you search for certain phrases like Kikuyus are X or Luos are X or certain ethnic groups and so on, you're finding that the internet doesn't have a lot to say in those pockets, and that misinformation and disinformation actors can place themselves strategically there, knowing full well that no one else will be thinking about these search terms, but certain people will be at key points in their electoral cycle. I love podcasts. We have one. Newsletters as well. We have one as well. And so when we act and practice and hope for the best, when you travel 2, 3, 4 hours outside of Nairobi, Microsoft has a project using what they call TV white spaces or free spectrum post-digital to be very affordable internet with no prescriptions. You have Facebook flying, I believe, drones, Project Aquila, to beam down affordable internet, and them embedded in the telcos to give people, free access with no images at all. So they do, and then Google, of course, with Project Loon, beaming down from tens of thousands of feet high signals for connectivity. So because of all those activities, which they label as CSR, by the way, they are making no apologies about going very aggressively to make sure that using their services is part and parcel of everyday life. And it's occupying more and more time of digital citizens across the continent and the global majority.
Maybe just one more. We talked while you were in my office about your partnership with Cote d'Ivoire kind of connection. And so I wanted to maybe ask you to let the group know about the different sorts of connections that you have in across languages, because I think that's definitely useful for us to know.
Sure. So we describe ourselves as a company with a Pan-African ambition, and so while we don't have offices in different countries outside of Kenya, we've worked across 14 African countries now, and technically a few others on consulting projects, including India. And so we maintain a network of partners and consultants, or what we call nomads, who can collaborate with us. So as you said, for French-speaking Africa, we have resources or key people in Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire. For Portuguese-speaking Africa, it's Angola and Rwanda specifically. The East African, or the Horn of Africa and the East African part is us. And so we have some Somali speakers. We have French speakers as well. And Swahili, of course, is where we've put in a lot of the machine learning and artificial intelligence work that we're doing with the help of a tool called Crimson Hexagon on the social listening project, really to try and build up what we hope is the process that allows us to collaborate with someone else and have them fit in and help us in the areas and languages that we wouldn't be able to do ourselves.
I think as we kind of start winding up, it would be useful for Carla in Nairobi, to maybe also add a voice, having worked on this project quite long.
Was that Rushdie?
Yeah.
I can't see your face, but I recognize the voice. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks, Mark. I mean, it's so important to have these discussions and learnings and opportunities to engage, because what we are finding is that it's no longer business as usual for us in this space. The information ecosystem that we are doing civic and voter education in is rapidly evolving, and sorry, there's just a bit of disturbance here. So I was just saying that the civic and vote education landscape that we're operating in is no longer what we thought it was. We have so much influence coming from outside and serious media manipulation that is affecting the way that we're engaging with communities and public members, and the way that electoral management bodies are also doing this type of work. So doing this project in Kenya has been a real eye-opener. We've been able to look at some insights and look at how not just to fight fake news, but also to look at incitement to violence and counter hate speech, and haven't recently gone to Indonesia to look at their programs as well. We definitely need to do more in this space. And the tools that these media manipulators are using are so sophisticated and it's deeply orchestrated to sow seeds of division for political gain or for extremist views as well. And we can't just be on the ground doing offline interventions anymore. We definitely need to complement it with online and offline together. And in regards to what Chris was raising earlier, mentioning, how effective is just media literacy programs and fact-checking. I think what we're increasingly finding is that in isolation, yes, it's good to build up media literacy skills and to create more critical thinkers and more healthy skepticism among public members. But media literacy on its own is not going to give us the impact that we desire. Media literacy works really well for people who want to seek out the truth, but how do we keep engaging the members of the public that are so far gone to the extreme side and don't believe in democratic values and pluralism and things like that? So it's a constant effort. I think that there's just so much we need to learn and unlearn, as Mark said in the beginning, and we need to keep instilling this practice of embedding these types of tools and softwares and approaches into our M&E work and design of our programs so that we can become smarter and be more impactful. I think that would be really beneficial for us all going forward. But it's definitely been an exciting time, and we look forward to sharing all of the insights with you all. We'll be developing some reports and we'll circulate them to all of the IFAS teams once they're developed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you. This has been, once again, eye-opening as to what the next chapter looks like. When you say social listening is going to become a practice, a discipline that election commissions are going to have to figure out how to move as fast as this form of communication, or they'll never catch up. That's going to be a major, major challenge for us in providing technical assistance to election commissions that are notoriously risk averse as far as engaging in communications, because this is all risk. This is all risk. So thank you. You've really opened our eyes again.
Thank you.